Hello, this is Mayor Hatem, and I'm here this afternoon to answer some of your questions concerning the recent release of my video on Tuesday. This is a follow-up, and we have 5 questions that I'd like to address. You'll be able to send questions to the city website every week, and we will do this weekly in terms of answering your concerns and your questions. The first question is concerning the clarification between the state of emergency versus the recent cancellation of city events here in Southport. The state of emergency that was declared by me as mayor and also by the governor of the state of North Carolina, this is something that can be lifted if the conditions permit us to do so. And we hope we can do that. Then small businesses can reopen, restaurants can reopen. But until that time, it is not an environment which we can reopen safely. The cancellation of city events. This was done because the virus is still out there. Think of it that way. It is still out there, and allowing hundreds or thousands of people into our city that could potentially infect our population, again, an at-risk population. This will not be lifted until Labor Day. So that is the difference between the two. We hope that we can lift the state of emergency, but we cannot at this time envision lifting the cancellation of these city events until Labor Day in order to protect our citizens. Our second question is, who made the decision to cancel these city events? Well, as your mayor, I make the final decision on these issues, and particularly this one, but I have done so in consultation with members of our city government. I have discussed this with the governor's office. I've talked to public health officials, and I've also talked to physicians who are on the front line treating COVID-19 patients. And they were all in agreement that this was the right course for Southport at this time. So again, it was not a unilateral decision, but I am responsible for that decision, and it rests on me. Third question, are there any cases reported in Southport? The county releases the number of cases. They do not release the location. No town, no city is listed. This is to protect patients' identity. So until that policy changes, just consider it as a county-wide number of cases, and that's all we know at this time. Our fourth question is, again, one of the more controversial issues, and you've heard about this and read about this, is the use of hydroxychloroquine, also known as Plaquenil, a drug that used to treat rheumatoid arthritis and also lupus. It is an anti-inflammatory. They have found that in vitro, meaning in test tubes, that it has some effect on the coronavirus. They have also used this drug in conjunction with azithromycin, generally known as the Z-Pak. And it was a very small study in France, and they had 36 patients. And basically, patients did well on the combination of hydroxychloroquine and Zithromax. They had viral clearance, but this is a very small study. And to make the controversy even deeper, the American College of Cardiology has released a statement that the use of these drugs, this combination of drugs, in patients with cardiovascular disease, and many of these COVID-19 patients have this, can cause sudden death. And so until the studies are complete, the randomized controlled studies, and they are in the process right now, this is not being recommended universally to be used. Fifth question, comparing COVID-19 and the flu. And again, that's a very good question because we're all familiar with the flu. Obviously not so much with COVID-19. So let me try to break it down in the best way that I understand it, in the way that we all can. Let's just start with the mortality rate. The mortality rate for influenza, seasonal flu, is 0.1%. The mortality rate for COVID-19 is roughly 1%. So 10 times the mortality rate, 10 times more lethal. Secondly, influenza is a contagious disease, but COVID-19 is a highly contagious respiratory infection. So the spread is rapid, and the onset of the disease process, when it starts, can be quite severe and fatal. It is the high morbidity. 80%, as I said, do reasonably well, but there are 20% that become quite ill, and between 4 and 5% require ICU. This includes sometimes intubation and ventilator support. These are very high intensity healthcare patients requiring teams of doctors, nurses, respiratory therapists, and that type thing. And think of it, when they're trying to take care of these patients, they have to protect themselves in this situation. So it is a very difficult, high energy and high use of medical supplies, medical equipment, a very intensive therapy. You do not see that in cases with influenza. So the difference, again, is COVID-19 is not just the flu. It's much more contagious, 10 times the mortality rate. And the patients that do become ill become quite ill and end up on ventilators. Again, a very high intensive medical situation. So for someone to say it's no more than the flu, I think you see that from what I've described, it is certainly much more than that.